so let's have a look at tonight's fixtures in the English Football League. So we're looking at Championship League 1, League 2 and National League. I've added the National League this season. I only decided to do it yesterday because I saw there were fixtures and thought, you know what, why not? It's progressed to a stage of the season where we can use current data. So let's have it. And I'm always quite interested in the National League. I quite enjoy betting on it myself in the past. So what I'm going to do is just have a look at the current matches. I'm just going to look at the first one in each league. These are the fixtures as you can see on the screen, and these are using current data. So in the Championship, I think we've got how many games played? Like 8 or something. I know I normally say 10, but yeah, 8. League 1 we've got 7, and it's about the same in all the leagues. So I'm going a little bit early. What you will notice is some of the matches have been removed because the teams don't satisfy the threshold for the data to be usable. So basically, if each team hasn't conceded and scored a goal at home and away, if there's any 0 in any of those columns, the Poisson formula won't work. So if you notice, these fixture lists aren't going to be complete because the games that haven't got the data I've took out because there's no point. You'll just see error figures. So these are the ones that do work. The vast majority do, so that's good. And by the weekend, I imagine all of them will be working because the fixtures tonight will probably produce those goals that are missing. So what I wanted to do was just have a look at some of the fixtures and look at what I do when deciding whether to use the values presented to us to bet, or whether I think that they're not really that useful. Just sort of give an idea of. So obviously, a few people have asked me, how do you narrow down the games? Because you can't bet on every single game, which is completely true. So I'll just show you what I do with the matches to decide whether I think it's worth taking a punt on or not. So what I'll do is I'll go through the first game on the list just to show that I'm not sort of selecting games for any particular reason. So Blackburn, Watford. So here we can see Blackburn, Watford, and so the odds are suggesting that it's going to be a very close game, that Watford have got the slight edge. So these are the Betfair odds at the time of recording. So it's suggesting that Watford have got the slight edge. The value odds say that the edge should be a bit bigger, that Watford should be shorter favourites. So they're both coming out on the same side, but it should be a bit closer, we're saying, according to the value odds. And also that the draw would be a lot closer than the odds suggest. So it's taking some off Blackburn and giving it to the draw, basically. So that's what the data is suggesting just from looking at the Poisson pack. But I wouldn't want to just go and bet on that straight away, just on the strength of that. So what I would then be doing would be going and looking at the league tables and the fixtures and stuff. So let's have a look if we can see why there's the discrepancy, why the Poisson pack is suggesting something different to the value odds, to the odds that are being offered. Sorry. So just a cursory look at the table, just a quick look, and we noticed that Blackburn and Watford are just separated by 1 place and 1 point, so very close. So that gives you an idea why the odds are suggesting that it's so close. And so that sort of stacks up, doesn't it? And then if we go to the wide table, which I always like to do when I'm looking at things like this, we'll have a look at the home and away records of each team. So it's Blackburn at home. So we're looking at Blackburn have played 4. Now you can see they've won 2, lost none, drawn none, and lost 2. So they've got a 50% win-loss ratio at home. So that's perhaps telling us a little bit more why Watford are giving the edge in the Poisson, because they've lost 2 of their home games already. So if we look at Watford's away record, we'll see they've played 4. They haven't won any, but they've drawn all 4, and they've got a sort of equal goal difference. So what does that tell us? So that tells us that Watford haven't lost away from home. They've drawn each game, which means, would you want to be betting on Blackburn? Probably not, considering they've lost 2 games already at home, and knowing that Watford are a strong team as it is. Would you say that the sort of odds of 320 on Blackburn are fair, or would 560 be closer? Maybe something in the middle, if you ask me. The draw is an interesting one, isn't it? So the draw is priced up at 330. 294, considering Watford have drawn every single game away and they're close in the table. Blackburn have won 2 of their games. They haven't drawn at home, but they've lost 2 of their games, meaning they are very inconsistent at home. The only thing left is to meet in the middle and draw. I'd suggest that the draw is showing good value. So I think laying Blackburn would probably be sort of sensible, but I don't know if you'd really get the odds for laying Blackburn. So this is what's going through my mind when I'm looking at this. I'm liking the draw, and if you then, what I would then do is go and look at the sort of the game, maybe in a little bit more detail, not in terms of team news just yet, because that'll come later, but if you look at Blackburn's home games so far and Watford's away games, only in the Championship we're looking. And so now this tells a nice picture, I think, in terms of why the odds might differ. As we know, Watford have drawn all 4 of their games. I've actually watched a couple of those games, especially the Blues game that I watched, and Watford were the better team and should have won. I felt like they were good against West Brom and probably should have got a win in that. Admittedly, they've lost a couple of players since then, but all in all, I'd suggest that a lot of those draws weren't a million miles away from being wins. And if you look at Blackburn, they've lost their last 2 home games to Bristol City and to Stoke. They had 2 good wins to start with. So although they've won 2 and lost 2, they've actually, they've lost their last 2. So again, that would suggest that I'd want to have at least the draw on side, if not Watford. And I think that gives you a good idea of why the odds differ. So these are the bookies odds, these are the value odds. And I think that the value odds have probably got a little bit of merit in what they're saying, to be honest, especially with the fact that the draw looks more likely. And that just gives you a little bit of a taste of what it looks like and why it looks like that, I think. So what about if we do League One? So what about Barnsley Port Vale in League One? Maybe we'll just leave it at this for the video. We'll just do Barnsley Port Vale. We don't need to do one in each league. But Barnsley Port Vale, so we're looking at Barnsley having a slight advantage in terms of the bookies odds, 2.18 compared to 3.75 for Port Vale, 3.50 for the draw, and the value odds are saying that it's sort of a similar story, but there's slightly less chance of Port Vale getting anything out of the game according to the value odds, and a much higher chance of the draw. So we're skimming some off Port Vale and giving it to the draw. So a more dominant home performance, if you like, in terms of what's going on there. So if we have a little look, I'm just looking at the notes that I made on it when I was looking at it earlier. Yeah, value suggests similar, slightly more chance of a draw. So we're looking at, we don't need to go in this too much because there's not too much of a difference. So you've got Barnsley here in 10th position and Port Vale are down in 17th, but there's actually only 2 points between them. And when we look at the wide table, it doesn't really sort of shed any light on anything that we should be sort of concerned about. I think there's sort of they've won 2 and drawn 1 at home of Barnsley, and Port Vale have won 1 and lost 2 away. It's all very even. So I think, again, I'd say that the draw is probably something that I'd want to have on side, but a home win would be sort of understandable as well. So I think Poisson and the real odds sort of match up quite nicely there, and that's fine as well. I mean, I like to see them match up because it means that the Poisson odds are sort of accurate, if you like. If you're not always going to get crazy value, but the fact that we can sort of replicate the odds is a good thing because it means we know where the bookies are coming from, and we can exploit those little gaps when they do come. We don't want to be a million miles away from the bookies odds every time because they know what they're doing. If you're going to be a million miles away, it's not representing value every time. It means you're probably doing something wrong when you're creating your own odds. So yeah, I mean, so League Two, I looked at Wimbledon, Northampton again, made a couple of notes. This one was actually slightly more interesting, I think. So we will have a look at this one. So this one's got the home odds as being 2.78, draw 3.15, and Northampton at 2.92. Whereas we've actually, looking at our value odds, this is a much more interesting one because we're looking at much longer odds for the home team, much shorter odds for the away team. So is that value or is that something that has sort of gone wrong? Again, it's very early days, so the data isn't completely as at it where I'd like it to be with a few more games needed. But let's have a look at what's going on in this one then. So you can see in this one that we've got Wimbledon are actually down in am I in the right league? Sorry, no, in the National League there. I knew they were down here somewhere. So Wimbledon are in 15th place, and Port Vale. Are we saying Port Vale? Sorry, I'm at 6th and 7th. Wimbledon, Northampton. So Wimbledon are down in 15th place. Northampton are at 5th. So that's 10 places. Places aren't that much of a problem at this time of the season, but it can sway the sort of casual punter into choosing one side over the other. It's like, God, they're like 10 places ahead, blah, blah. But in this case, so Northampton have got 14 points and Wimbledon have got 8 points. And if we look at the wide table, you'll notice that. So again, looking at my notes that I've made for this game as part of my betting portfolio, we're looking at Wimbledon having won one game, drawn one and lost one at home. So a very sort of average record really. They've only won 1 out of 3 if you look at it that way. Whereas Northampton have actually won 1 and drawn 2 and haven't lost away from home. So that's a really strong start to the season away from home for Northampton, and an average start at home for Wimbledon. So already I'm thinking, well, that's way too short. And I'd argue that 1.181 is probably a little bit short, but 2.92, I'd definitely be well involved in that for Northampton. So if we do what we did before, look at League Two at home. We need to first click on Northampton's fixtures. Northampton, Wimbledon. So if we're looking at League Two home, League Two away, and we can see that in their last 2 home games, Wimbledon, they've lost their last game. Before that, they drew. So, you know, the win came in the first home game of the season. Since then, it hasn't got any better. In fact, it's got gradually worse. It's like a traffic light system. If you look at the away games for Northampton, they drew their last game with Crewe, won their game before and drew the one before that. So they're in much better form away from home than Wimbledon are at home. And I think that all that stacks up to justifying why we've got a bit of a difference here, and that could be genuine value. And that's, to wrap it up, that's what I look for when I'm looking for value in the system. I think that clearly shows why we've got the sort of discrepancies in the value system. And I'm not saying that this will always come off and you'll always win this bet, but this is where we want to try and exploit the value. So I hope you've enjoyed looking at that. I'm going to start rolling out these leagues as and when. Probably 8 games is probably, I'm going to cut it down to 8 with the advisory note that the data is not as full as I'd like it to be, but you can still sort of get some value out of it, as I think you can see here. So if you want to get involved, head over to the website and I'll keep on sharing what I can. Thanks very much.